Ladies and gentlemen, have you heard the big news? Have you heard about it? It's huge news. It's breaking all over Fox News and CNN and MSNBC for the 5 people that watch that. It's all they can talk about. It's unbelievable. Have you heard about it? By the way, this is Kirk Jackson on the No Name Podcast, 4th episode. Thanks for clicking in and listening. Make sure and hit the subscribe and like button. We appreciate you clicking in. We appreciate you guys listening to this. It's a huge encouragement to us. Also, before I get any farther into it, if you've got a question, if you've got a comment, if you've got an argument that you'd like to voice or an opinion that you haven't heard me express that you think I should, please shoot me an email at nonamepodcast, the number 1, at gmail.com for that. If you've got any topics or any material that you'd like to send in and have me talk about. Also, that's the place to send it, nonamepodcast1 at gmail.com. We certainly appreciate that. We look forward to getting all sorts of things in that email. But the big news today, there's huge breaking news. Apparently, Trump is the most persecuted man to ever walk this earth, according to Fox News and Drudge Report and all the other news outlets. It's amazing. I can't believe that we've overlooked something this huge and this monstrous for so long. It's unbelievable. He's the most persecuted man ever. The banner that just popped up on Fox News, it said that the media coverage, the negative media, it's relentless. He can't even find time to breathe and let all of this sink in. It's just been bombarding him day in and day out. Kind of amazing, isn't it? He's the president of the United States, leader of the free world, lives in one of the most prestigious residences in the entire world, does not have to dial a phone. He's got somebody to do that. He's got somebody to tie his red ties. He's got somebody to comb his hair. He's got somebody to help him with just about every facet of everyday life, yet he is the most persecuted person maybe to ever walk this earth. Methinks they have it wrong. Yeah, Trump is going through a lot of negative publicity. He's got a tough hill to climb dealing with the Senate and Chuck and Nancy and Paul and Mitch. And yes, he does. He's got it tough. It's certainly not easy being president of the United States, no doubt about that. And of course, I support him in almost everything that he does. But I think they're making a mountain out of a molehill here. I don't think he's quite there as far as getting the title for the most persecuted man on earth. I think he's got just a little ways to go there. Who is that one guy that, he kind of dealt with some stuff. People didn't really care for him. Paul. I can't remember his last name right now, but about 2,000 years ago, there was this cat named Paul who walked around, and he went through a few things, nothing in comparison to Donald Trump, but he was stoned, he was beaten, he was whipped, he was shipwrecked, he had a terrible stomach affliction, health issues, and I guess they killed him, but still, he's in the running, I guess, with Trump. That other guy that they flipped upside down and nailed him to 2 boards, what was that guy? Peter, and I can't remember his last name either. There was a guy named Stephen who was stoned. He was just pretty much a kid and didn't really do anything wrong other than just preach the gospel, do what Jesus wanted him to do, but they stoned him and killed him. And then there was one other guy, Jesus. Yeah, didn't they kill him? Didn't they strip him naked, tie him to a tree, nail him to a tree, actually, mock him, beat him, whip him, scourge him, and what's worse, there was no Billy Bush tape with him. There was no build a wall. There was no angry tweets in the middle of the night. There was no nothing with Jesus. He was simply a good guy. He better than that. By today's standards, he was God. Oh, wait, he was God. He was perfect. He did nothing, and they beat him, killed him, crucified him, mocked him, shamed him, all for us. I think he might have been in the running for the most persecuted man to live also. Donald Trump, I think he's a fine president. I think that this is just the beginning as far as what he's going to do, as far as the way he's going to turn this country around. I think things are going to get really, 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 really good with Donald Trump. But when you hear him say stuff like, no one has ever been treated more badly than me, no president has ever been treated more badly than me, I think John Kennedy and I think Abraham Lincoln would probably disagree with him. I think that Garfield guy would probably disagree with him too. He hasn't been shot at yet. I hope he never does. But you have to be pretty conceited when you say that you have been treated more badly than any president before him. And with the coverage on Fox and on Drudge Report and on a couple of the talk radio shows, they don't help when they say that the Fox News, or that the, Trump negative coverage has just been relentless. Folks, he isn't anywhere close to being persecuted the way a lot of Christians have been and will be persecuted. That's why I thought I'd take just a few moments to talk about persecution. And that topic is so wide and ranging, but why are Christians persecuted? Why do we go through persecution in our daily lives because of Christ? Because the Bible says Jesus is the building block that the builders reject. He's the cornerstone that causes people to stumble. He's the stumbling block. He doesn't fit in. He's not frilly and fluffy and really acceptable. The teachings of the Bible aren't acceptable. It's a tough row to hoe. People don't accept Jesus, the gospel, and the Bible in a way that you and I might think they should. It's certainly a hard thing to come to grasps with, because as Christians, we know Jesus and the gospel to be our, no pun intended, life's blood, our mission, the thing that helps us fall asleep at night. When we lay our heads on our pillow at night, we know that if we don't wake up, we will wake up in the arms of Christ in the pearly gates of heaven with such a glorious existence there on out, that it's just such a good feeling for us, knowing that there is a God, knowing that He thought so much of us as sinful, vile, wicked creations of His, that He sent His perfect Son to go through so much on this earth to die for us. It's truly, 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 truly a helpmeet for us knowing that. And when people reject that, when people reject the goodness, the loving kindness, the grace, and the mercy that God shows them, that we tell them about in a witnessing encounter, it's mind-boggling to us. I just wrote down some things very quickly to go over, and I'll do that coming up here after the break, but be thinking about why we as Christians go through the persecution that we go through. And you may not even realize you're being persecuted. We'll go into that as well, but we'll be doing that right after the break. Also, if you have anything that you'd like to hear me talk about, No Name Podcast, the number 1, No Name Podcast 1 at gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. Also, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button if you're watching this on YouTube. If you'd like to be emailed a copy of the show, we'll be happy to do that also. Just send your request to nonamepodcast1 at gmail.com. We'll be right back. And we're back. Thanks for sticking with us through the break. I had to do some doodling here with my notes, make sure that everything's in order. We're dealing with the question, why are we persecuted as Christians? Why when we have so much to look forward to after we die, why we have so much to look forward to here on earth, why do we have to go through persecution? Why does God allow us to be persecuted? I have 5 things written down. That's about 2 minutes apiece to stay on track. Number 1, we are persecuted to test us, to test the validity of our fruit that we produce in our lives, our spiritual fruit. Jesus says in the Sermon on the Mount that we will know them by their fruits. We will know fellow Christians by the fruits that they produce. The fruits of the Spirit are love, joy, peace, meekness, kindness, long-suffering, self-control, etc., etc., etc. But do you have any idea how easily it would be, and it is, to duplicate those fruits, to fool not only each other, but to make an attempt to fool God by playing, instead of the game of life, playing the game of church? You go to church once a week, you read your Bible every now and then, not very often. You pray before meals. You might even slip in some theology into an everyday conversation, but is it genuine? Do you really mean it? It reminds me of a story that took place in China, a true story. Some Chinese believers were gathering secretly in a building to have a church service. And before the church service started, Chinese officials, straight from the government, federal officials, broke in and said, everyone who does not really and truly believe in this, now's your chance, get out. Everybody else is going to be shot on sight. And 2/3 of that group scurried out the door. Then these Chinese officials who came in, were threatening to shoot these Christians on sight, took their caps off, laid their guns down, pulled Bibles out of their pockets, and said, we wanted to make sure there weren't any spies among you. Now, let's have church. Those Christians, the real, genuine Christians, the third of the people who stayed, probably thought that they were going to get a lot of persecution dealt to them right there. But in fact, the Chinese officials that broke in were just testing the validity of the genuine Christians, making sure that their fruit was genuine. I think that's one of the reasons we're persecuted. It reminds me of the Columbine story. Are you a Christian? Yes. Boom. There's no doubt that we will see that young girl whose life was taken from her in Columbine. There's no doubt that we will see her in heaven. No one else would die for the Christian faith unless they believed that Jesus died for them first and that they were sincerely and truly grateful. So to test our fruits, so that's number 1. Number 2, keep us humble. Isn't that odd? There's no better way to stay on your knees than have someone make you stay on your knees. And I think that's what God uses persecution for a lot, especially in today's world where everything is so cushy and easy, where it's easy to be a Christian. To keep us humble, James 4:9. It talks about persecution all throughout the book of James. It says, "Be afflicted and mourn and weep. Let your laughter be turned into mourning and your joy be turned into heaviness. Humble yourself in the sight of the Lord, and He shall lift you up." It's so easy to stay humble when you can tell that you've got such a huge road to climb. It's easy to stay humble when you're flat on your face looking up at everyone else. 1 Peter 3:14 says, if you suffer, for righteousness' sake, happy are ye. You should be happy that God is allowing you to be persecuted. And I know that's difficult. It's something that you really, really have to ponder and think about, and you probably struggle with. But persecution, like everything else that God gives us, is a blessing. It keeps us humble. It keeps us on the right path. Number 3, moving quickly, it keeps us content. Paul wrote the entire book of Philippians from a jail cell. He was about to be killed for his faith and for his testimony. And he wrote in Philippians that, not that I speak in respect of want, for I have learned in whatsoever state I am therewith to be content. It's so amazing how the act and the mindset of contentment eludes us today. We always have to have the newest and best thing. We always have to have the newest iPhone. We have to have the bigger TV. We have to be entertained on a daily, hourly, by-minute basis. Otherwise, we're not content. We're not content to be in whatever state we are at the moment, but persecution helps us. It gives us perspective on our lives, and you realize that when you're being persecuted, it could be so much worse. We could be living in China in an underground church. We could be living worse yet in Iran, where it's against the law to be anything other than Muslim. Not being able to bake a cake for a gay wedding, you're going to be persecuted for that. You're going to have your shop closed down. You're going to face all sorts of fines and put on by the federal government. That's persecution. Saying no to a Sunday job offer and turning down a lot of money or a potentially better job or a promotion, that's being persecuted. Saying, no, we're not going to go and hang with that in crowd and have a whole bunch of fun because they're living the party atmosphere. You know that you shouldn't be in that position. Instead, you're going to go home and you might spend a boring evening at home. That's being persecuted. But it keeps us content. It keeps everything in perspective when you think about how the Christians before us had been persecuted versus what you're giving up or maybe what you're going through right now. Number 4, it shows God's mercy. The mercy that God shows us, the loving kindness that God shows us, the grace that He bestows upon us is real. It's tangible. You can feel it. You can experience it. When you go through persecution, you are seeing God's mercy placed in your life firsthand. Paul, again, in 2 Timothy, it's the last book that he ever wrote before he was martyred for his faith. 2 Timothy 3, I think it's verse 11, it talks about all of the persecutions that he endured. Everything from being shipwrecked to health afflictions, to beaten, to stoned, to whipped, and eventually killed. It talks about all of those persecutions. But the end of that verse, and I think it's 11, he says, but out of all of these persecutions, the Lord delivered me. It is so phenomenal to know that Jesus will not put you through anything you cannot bear. His grace is sufficient. His mercy is tangible, and it's certainly relevant. We've got a sign hanging in our house. It's actually right behind me as I record this. It says, the will of God will not take you where the grace of God will not protect you. He will not put us through anything we can't bear. And His goodness, His grace, His loving kindness is all the more real and all the more appreciated after He brings you through the valley of the shadow of death or whatever persecution you're going through right now. The last reason why I believe God puts us through persecution and why He allows us to be persecuted is to keep us witnessing. What a better testimony, what a phenomenal testimony to come through a persecution and say, you know what, I understand that God allowed me to go through that, but He's still my God. I still love Him. He's still in control. We have to keep the witnessing in the forefront of our minds, because if we can save one soul from hell by the foolishness of preaching, we've not only helped one more soul get into heaven, but we've also hid a multitude of sins, and the Bible says that the angels rejoice when we do that. So, Donald, I know you're going through some stuff right now that you'd rather not be going through, but I think it could be much, much worse. Keep it in perspective. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for clicking in. That's the end of episode number 4 on the No Name Podcast. Again, if you've got anything that you'd like to hear me talk about, if you've got questions, if you've got an argument that you'd like to voice, please send us an email to nonamepodcast1, the number 1, at gmail.com. We thank you very much for clicking in again and listening. Don't forget, hit the like, hit the subscribe button if you like what you hear. If you'd like to have the show emailed daily to you in your inbox, please send that request to nonamepodcast1 at gmail.com. We'll be back next week. Thank you very much.